I heard the footsteps before I saw his face. The thud of boots striking the clinic's tile floor hit like hammers against my chest. Each step echoed through the sterile silence, so cold and sharp that even the cats in the diagnostic cages jolted awake, their cries slicing through the air. The man walked in carrying a soggy cardboard box, its edges buckled from melted snow. He said nothing. He just hurled it onto the reception counter. The hollow crack of the impact stole my breath, as if someone had slapped me across the ribs without warning. For a moment the room froze. Then from inside the box came a sound. Not a bark, not a whimper, just a frail whine, thin and broken, like the last breath of life clinging to its edge. "Need a vet." His voice was gravel wrapped in smoke, stripped of mercy. It wasn't a plea. It was a command. I shot to my feet, heart pounding, forcing myself to draw in a steady breath. "I'm here. What's your name?" He tugged the bill of his cap lower, shadowing his eyes. "Raymond Holt." The name itself carried the chill of the snow-capped ranges outside Bozeman. I'd heard whispers about the kennel he ran on the outskirts of town, about the trucks that came and went in the dead of night, about strange sounds drifting from the pens. But like every small town, people knew, and people stayed silent. I lifted the lid. 6 puppies huddled together, eyes barely open, their tiny bodies shivering in the bitter draft. Their collective whimpers rose like a single plea. "Don't abandon us." But in the corner of the box was another sight. One so small I could cup it in my palm. Its fur was patchy, ribs sharp under the skin, chest rising in jagged stutters. Each inhale came with a wheeze, the sound of a thread snapping strand by strand. Raymond folded his arms, his tone flat, cruel in its indifference. "That one's worthless. Even its mother gave up. Do the sensible thing, Doc. Put it down. Don't waste time. Don't waste meds. I've got plenty more that matter." I lifted my gaze. His eyes were empty, nothing but a ledger of profit and loss, life reduced to inventory. I bent down, slid my hand beneath the fragile body, and lifted it. The pup trembled, weightless as a leaf caught in a Montana blizzard. Then I felt it, a heartbeat, weak, fleeting, but still there, like a whisper brushing against my skin. "Don't let me go." My grip tightened, my voice steady, though my pulse raced. "No. As long as it's breathing, I'll fight for it." The air stiffened. Raymond stepped closer, breath heavy with tobacco, his frame blotting out the light. "New in town, aren't you, Doc? Let me give you some advice. There are things best left untouched, if you want to live easy." I pressed the puppy to my chest, letting it feel my heart beating strong, letting it know at least one person had chosen its side. I whispered, eyes locked with Holt's frozen glare. "From now on, your name is Valor." Not because it was strong yet, but because it would need to be. And because I needed the reminder too. This fight wasn't just for a dog. It was a stand against cruelty itself. Raymond drove his heel into the floor, the echo landing like a warning shot, then turned and stormed out. The door slammed, but his last words lingered like a blade against my throat. "You'll regret this." I sank into the chair, hands trembling, though my eyes never wavered. Against my chest, Valor's breath rattled on, chest rising in fragile bursts. I laid my palm over him, nodded once. "We'll fight together, Valor. You're going to live." Outside, snow kept falling, blanketing Bozeman in its false peace. But I knew. The real storm had only just begun. I laid the tiny body on the metal table, my hand still trembling from the confrontation minutes before. Valor's frame was ice cold, his skin stretched thin over brittle bones. I wrapped him in a white cotton towel, pressing him close, trying to pass what little warmth my body still carried into his. Each shallow breath carved into me like a blade. I bent low, placed my fingertip against his chest. The heart still beat, but broken, like a string instrument with wires torn loose. I whispered, "Hold on, Valor. Don't you give up." And then, like a wind cutting down from the Bridger Range, the memory of my husband surged back. The climbing accident 2 years ago had taken him from me. I had stood in the ER, listening as the monitor flatlined, staring at that cruel line across the screen. I had been helpless then, forced to watch the man I loved most slip from my hands. That helplessness haunted me still. But now another fragile life lay before me, balancing on the same edge. This time, I could fight, and I would not retreat. The door swung open. Caleb stood in the frame, his eyes wide, hair tousled by the winter wind. He looked at me, then at the towel in my arms. He said nothing. Since his father's death, words had rarely found their way past his lips. Silence had become his shelter, the only language left to him. He walked closer, slow, then sat down in the chair, his gaze fixed on the trembling body of the pup. And in his eyes, I saw something, a flicker of light I thought I'd lost forever. Is it going to live, Mom?" His voice was hoarse, small as a draft slipping under the door. I swallowed hard. As a doctor, I knew the odds of Valor surviving were nearly non-existent. But staring into my son's eyes, I couldn't give him that truth. I laid my hand on his shoulder and nodded. "As long as he breathes, we'll fight with him." Caleb leaned forward, touched his fingertip to Valor's nose. The puppy exhaled a faint rasp, fragile but real, enough to make my boy lift his head. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost breaking into a smile. In that moment, I understood. This was more than saving a dog. This was a chance to mend the fractured heart of my son, and maybe my own. Maya, my young assistant, lingered by the doorway. Our eyes met, hers clouded with worry, with pity. "Doctor," she whispered, "if he's in too much pain, are we only prolonging the suffering?" I turned, eyes bloodshot from strain, but my voice steady as stone. "No, Maya. As long as he wants to live, we have no right to abandon him." I held Valor tighter, feeling each fragile tremor beneath the towel. And in that instant, I made a vow, not just to the puppy, not just to Caleb, but to myself. No life would ever die in my care again just because someone else decided it wasn't worth saving. Outside, snow kept falling, smothering Bozeman in its false quiet. But I knew better. Behind that curtain of white, the real storm waited. Raymond Holt had left me his threat, and I had chosen to step straight into the fight. I lowered my face, brushed my lips across Valor's damp, chilled forehead. "From this moment on," I whispered, "we walk through the darkness together." I had lived through countless emergencies in my years as a veterinarian, but never had a life kept me counting every breath the way Valor did. For 3 days straight, I barely left the clinic. A folding cot pulled up beside the little crate lined with a heating lamp became my world. Every 2 hours, the alarm tore me from restless dreams. I mixed the formula, drew it into a syringe, and fed Valor drop by drop. Sometimes he swallowed, weak but determined. Sometimes the liquid spilled back, forcing me to stop, rub his chest, even whisper words that sounded more like prayers than instructions. "Drink, Valor. Don't you dare leave us." There were nights when snow hammered the window and the wind wailed like a chorus of lost souls. I pressed his tiny body against my chest, terrified that if I let go, he would vanish into the storm. His breaths faltered, his lungs like a machine breaking apart. I lay my ear against him, hearing his heartbeat pound like a small drum in a lopsided war. Maya often stood in the doorway, clutching a hot cup of coffee, her eyes red with exhaustion. "Doctor," she murmured, "are we keeping him alive only to make him suffer longer?" I lifted my head, my own eyes weary but my voice steady. "No, Maya, Valor hasn't given up, and while he fights, so do we." Caleb spent hours at my side. He didn't speak much, but his gaze never left Valor. Sometimes he pressed his small hand to the edge of the heated crate, whispering as if to himself, "Don't leave us, okay?" Every time I heard those words, my chest tightened, equal parts ache and hope. On the third night, the storm hit Bozeman hardest. Wind screamed through the cracks, and branches slammed against the roof. The yellow light in the room flickered like a candle about to die. Valor lay trembling, then, suddenly, his chest stopped moving. "No, no, no!" I shouted, tossing the syringe aside. My fingers pressed into his chest, rubbing, compressing, forcing rhythm back into a body that was letting go. "Breathe, Valor. Hear me. Don't quit. You're a fighter, remember?" The seconds stretched into centuries. Caleb stood frozen, tears streaming down his face. Maya trembled, the coffee cup slipping from her hands and shattering across the floor. I felt despair clawing at me. And then, against all odds, Valor's chest twitched. A ragged breath rasped out, frail but unmistakable. My heart detonated in relief. Tears fell onto his forehead as I bent low and whispered, "That's it, Valor. You found your way back." Caleb broke into sobs, but not only from fear. He dropped to his knees, pressed his hand to the towel, and choked out, "Mom, he didn't leave me. He's still here." I wrapped my arms around my son, my other hand cradling the fragile life between us. And in that moment, I understood. This battle was no longer just between me and death. It was about restoring faith to Caleb, proving to my boy that miracles still existed, even in the form of a trembling, fragile creature. When the storm finally calmed, dawn still far from breaking, I sat in silence beside Valor, my vision blurred with exhaustion. He slept, his breath uneven but steadier. Beside him, Caleb had dozed off, his hand still resting on the crate, a silent promise that no one would ever walk through the darkness alone again. I looked at them both, and the truth struck clear. Valor wasn't only fighting for his own survival. He was fighting for my family, and we, with every ounce of love we had left, would fight alongside him to the very end. On the fourth day, the first sunlight broke through over Bozeman. The sun hung low above the Bridger Range, its pale gold unable to chase away the shadow still lodged inside me. Valor was still clinging to life, and during the brief hours when he slept in fragile peace, I turned to examine the rest of the litter Raymond had abandoned. As my hand brushed over their thin coats, I felt it. Something was wrong. Bruises beneath the skin, scratches that no careless mother dog could have caused. No, these were marks of violence. I documented everything, snapping photos with my phone. Evidence. I knew in this town, silence was the price of survival, but my conscience refused to bend. That afternoon, I made an excuse to go out for antibiotics. Caleb stayed with Maya, the two of them watching over Valor. I drove along the ice-crusted back roads, the truck jolting over frozen potholes. The deeper I went toward the edge of town, the taller the pines grew, rising like black walls. Holt's kennel appeared, a long row of rusted iron cages, tin roofs rattling under the wind. In the yard, Holt poured water into rusty bowls. When he spotted me, his eyes narrowed, suspicion hardening his face. "Back again, Doc." His voice was thick with smoke. "That runt still not dead?" I kept my tone steady, masking the anger curling in my chest. Valor's alive, and I need more meds for the others. I'm seeing signs of umbilical infection. If untreated, it'll kill them." Holt stared at me for a long beat. Then, to my surprise, he nodded, motioned for me to follow. We crossed the yard. As we passed a row of darkened sheds, a sound stopped me cold. Barking, but not the high-pitched yips of puppies. These were rough, hoarse, strangled. Voices of grown dogs, caged too long, breaking the air with their desperation. I froze. "What's in there?" "Just stock," Holt snapped, eyes narrowing. I held his gaze. "If there are dogs inside, I'm obligated to check them." He pivoted sharply, stepping closer. His shadow loomed like a wall of steel. The sour stench of burned coffee and tobacco washed over me as his voice dropped, each word cutting like a blade. "Careful, Hannah. In this town, touch the wrong things and you'll never know peace again." My skin prickled, but I didn't back down. I kept my spine straight, signed for the medication, and walked out of that yard. On the drive back, my grip strangled the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Snow began to fall again, sharp flakes tapping the windshield like pins. In the rearview mirror, my chest tightened. A black pickup trailed me a few hundred yards back. No headlights, no horn, just a shadow following. I held my speed, feigning calm, sweat slicking my palms. Each turn, each screech of tires on ice, I wondered, had I just placed my son and Valor in danger? As I neared the turn into town, the truck veered suddenly onto a forest road, disappearing into the trees. My breath burst out, my chest aching as though I'd been spared the edge of a knife, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave me. That evening, I sat in the clinic. Valor lay wrapped in warm cloth, his breathing still shallow. Caleb sat close, his hand resting on the crate, his eyes blissfully unaware of what I had just faced. I pressed my palm to Valor's tiny chest, felt the fragile rhythm of his heart, and inside me a question beat like a war drum. What was Raymond Holt hiding in those sheds? And did I have the courage to drag it into the light, while right here before me, a life was still clawing for every breath? I leaned down, whispered into Valor's ear. "Forget the darkness outside. As long as you fight, I won't back down." Outside, snow poured thick, swallowing Bozeman in a silence too heavy to trust. But I knew this much. From this day on, I wasn't only fighting to keep one puppy alive. I had stepped into a war with something far more dangerous. After the storm, Valor began to fade. That night, I heard his breathing break apart. Each inhale and exhale stretched thin, like a fraying cord ready to snap. I bent low, my hand trembling against his chest. The heartbeat was sparse, so faint I could almost believe it had stopped. "No, Valor. No," I whispered, though even I could hear the quiver in my voice. Maya stood behind me, her eyes wide with fear. "Doctor, if he lets go, maybe it's time." I turned, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights carved in stone. "Not yet. He's still fighting. And as long as he hasn't surrendered, we don't have the right to abandon him." A thought jolted through me. In the corner sat a sealed crate shipped from the Research Institute in Missoula. I remembered the red label. Experimental device, research use only, not approved for clinical practice. Inside was a neonatal pressure oxygen chamber. I'd never imagined using it. Until now. My pulse hammered as I dragged the crate to the table. My fingers shook while tearing the seal. "Maya, help me set it up." She stared at me, uncertain. "If something goes wrong..." "There is no if," I cut in. "Either we try or we lose him tonight." We snapped joints into place, tightened bolts, and connected the oxygen pump. The glass chamber took shape, small as a cocoon. I lifted Valor into it with both hands, my throat locking tight. "God, please," I whispered, pressing the switch. The machine whirred to life, monitors flashing a cascade of numbers. For the first seconds, Valor didn't move. Time congealed. 1, 2, 3. I felt as if I were watching life drain from him before my eyes. Then, suddenly, his chest rose. A rasping breath, but deeper than before. The numbers climbed, steadied. A warmth spread through the room. Maya buried her face in her hands and wept. I slumped into the chair, tears breaking free, crushed by exhaustion yet lifted by relief. "That's it, Valor. You're not giving up." But the grace lasted only hours. By morning, the clinic door banged open. Raymond Holt stood in the frame, his bulk swallowing the light. His frozen eyes were fixed on the oxygen chamber. "Expensive," he growled, "for a worthless runt." I moved in front of the machine, fists clenched. "He's not worthless. He deserves to live, and I will save him." Holt stepped forward, towering like a wall of iron, smoke on his breath searing the air between us. "Listen close, Cole. You're wasting time, wasting money, and worst of all, wasting your peace. Folks here don't want trouble, and they won't bring their dogs to a vet who can't keep her mouth shut." My heart hammered, but I didn't budge. I locked my gaze on his, my voice honed to steel. "Every life has value here. Valor will live. That isn't yours to decide." The corner of his mouth lifted in a cold smile, but his eyes were black as a pit. "Fine, play your game. But remember, this town is small, and people never forget." The door slammed, and silence collapsed over the room. My knees buckled, but my eyes stayed fixed on the chamber. Inside, Valor stirred, his tiny legs twitching as if reaching toward me. I pressed my palm against the glass and whispered, "It's all right, Valor. No matter what comes, I won't abandon you." Outside, snow drifted steadily, quiet as fate itself. Yet inside me, a strange conviction took root, that this fragile pup would be the light cutting through the shadows Holt was hiding. I turned to Maya, my voice raw but certain. "We're not just saving a dog. We're standing against cruelty, and we will not back down." That night I sat beside the chamber, the monitor's blue glow reflecting off my tired face. I opened my notebook, hand shaking but firm, and wrote, "Day 5. Valor is alive, and I will walk with him to the very end of the truth." I had prepared for countless surgeries in my career, but never had my hands trembled the way they did that day. Valor was so small, his body no stronger than a paper-thin leaf, and the steel trap had crushed his tiny leg beyond recognition. If the surgery failed, he would lose the limb. If it went worse, he would lose his life. Through the glass, Caleb stood with his face pressed against the operating room window. His eyes were wide, locked on Valor. In that silent gaze was both terror and faith. He didn't cry, didn't scream. He was waiting for me, the way I once waited for doctors to save my husband. But back then, no one could. Today had to be different. "Maya, prepare anesthesia," I said, my voice ragged. Valor looked up at me, his brown eyes trembling as if to ask, "Can I trust you?" I bent low and whispered, "It's all right, little warrior. I'm here." The anesthesia crept through him, and his body went limp. I took the scalpel, inhaled deeply. The room was silent, broken only by the faint beeping of the monitor. I stitched with painstaking precision, as if I were stitching my own heart. Each thread was a prayer. Then, the monitor screamed, a single piercing tone. The line went flat. Valor's heart had stopped. My body froze, blood roared in my ears. Caleb's fists pounded the glass. "Mom!" His scream tore through me like shrapnel. "I need epinephrine, now!" I shouted. Maya rushed the syringe into my hand. I plunged the needle into Valor's chest and pushed the drug in. 1 second. 2. 3. Nothing. I bent down, pressing on that fragile chest with both fingers, compressing hard enough to fear I'd break him. "Don't leave me, Valor. You promised." My tears splattered across his face, mixing with the blood staining the towel. Then, suddenly, the monitor jumped. 1 beat, weak but alive. Then another. Air burst from my lungs. My body sagged with relief. "Good boy, Valor," I whispered. "You came back." The surgery dragged on for more than 3 hours. I stitched the last wound, wiped the blood away, and dressed the injury. When I peeled off the gloves, my hands shook uncontrollably. I stepped out of the operating room. Caleb rushed forward, eyes rimmed red. Is he alive?" I dropped to my knees, set my hand on his shoulder. "He's alive, stronger than we ever believed." At that, Caleb broke. His shoulders shook as sobs poured out. He buried his face against my hand, choking. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you for not giving up on him." I held my son close, my own tears burning hot. I knew then, not only had Valor been saved, Caleb had reclaimed his faith. That night, I stayed beside the recovery bed. Valor lay curled in a white blanket, his breathing weak but steady. Caleb dragged a chair close, dozing with his small hand resting on the edge of the blanket, as if afraid letting go would make Valor vanish. I looked at them both, my chest aching with wonder. The sight was nothing short of a miracle. A boy who had locked his heart away, and a puppy once cast aside as worthless, saving each other from the abyss. Around midnight, Valor opened his eyes, clouded by anesthesia, but in them flickered something uncanny. He wasn't looking at me. He looked straight at Caleb. His tiny ears quivered as though calling his name. I brushed my hand down his back. "It's all right, warrior. He's right here." Valor sighed softly and closed his eyes again, but I knew he understood. He was no longer alone. In that sterile room, reeking of antiseptic, I witnessed something medicine could never explain. An invisible thread was weaving itself between a boy and a dog, a thread strong enough to pull them both back from the edge of death. I leaned into the chair, eyes drifting to the window. Snow kept falling, cloaking Bozeman streets in a sheet of white silence. But inside me, a fire had sparked, a belief that love, even fragile, even small, could alter fate itself. And from that moment on, I knew my life would never be the same. The first morning after surgery, when pale sunlight filtered through the frosted glass, I woke on the stiff chair beside the recovery bed. Valor was no longer gasping. His chest rose and fell in a steadier rhythm, breaths fragile but sure. Caleb sat close, his head slumped against the blanket's edge, his hand curled loosely around Valor's paw. He had fallen into deep sleep, his face still streaked with dried tears, but at the corners of his mouth lingered a small smile. My throat tightened at the sight. In all my years as a veterinarian, I had witnessed countless battles for life, but never one that carried so much weight. I opened the crate and carried Valor gently into the yard. Montana's morning air bit cold, heavy with the scent of snow and pine. I set him down on the grass. His tiny legs trembled, bandaged and heavy, yet his eyes gleamed with light. He tried to take a step, then collapsed. I rushed forward, but Caleb was quicker. He caught Valor, whispering, "It's okay. I'll help you, just like Mom taught me to water the garden." Valor looked up, brown eyes shining. He stood again. One step, then another. His body quivered, but each movement declared, "I haven't given up." My nose stung with tears. It was a miracle, not just a puppy learning to walk, but my son learning to rise from his grief. "You see, Caleb," I murmured, "what keeps us alive isn't just medicine. It's a reason to keep going." Caleb turned to me, eyes wet. "Mom, Valor is my reason." The words cut through every wall I had built. I pulled him into my arms, both of us clutching Valor tight. In that moment, I understood. A life once dismissed as worthless had become the key to healing a human heart. That afternoon, Maya sorted files at the counter. I caught her gaze, changed now. No longer just respect for a doctor, but recognition for someone who chose to fight to the end. "Thank you, doctor," she whispered. "Thank you for teaching me that every life matters." Outside, the snow began to melt, patches of green breaking through. Valor stretched out under the sunlight, his head resting on Caleb's legs. Two souls, once at the edge of the abyss, now warming each other. I watched, my heart lighter than it had been in years, as though breathing freely for the first time. That evening, as the town lights flickered on, I sat at my desk, opened my journal. My hand trembled, but each word landed firm. Day 7. Valor took his first steps. He will never be abandoned again. I lifted my eyes, peering into the darkness outside. Holt was still there, lurking like a ghost. But fear no longer owned me. I had seen with my own eyes, a fragile creature could rise, and a broken heart could be reborn because of it. Holt could spread his shadows, but love would always burn brighter. I turned to Caleb, wrapped him in my arms. From today, Valor is part of this family. Not just a rescued dog, but a warrior. And we will protect him, as he has protected us. Caleb nodded, his small arms hugging Valor tight. "I promise, he'll never be alone again." Tears fell into my son's hair, but they were no longer tears of despair. They were tears of release. That night, I wrote one final line in my journal. Sometimes miracles don't come from heaven's brilliance, but from a fragile life that chooses to live, and the heart's brave enough to hold on. I looked out at Bozeman's sky. The snow had stopped. A pale moon broke through the clouds. I knew the road ahead would not be easy, but with Caleb, with Valor, and with the faith reborn in me, we would walk it, step by trembling step, but steady. If anyone ever asked me the greatest lesson of my years as a veterinarian, I would say, no life is worthless, no love is wasted. And sometimes, the smallest lives we once overlooked become the greatest teachers. Even now, I often sit and watch Valor curled in a blanket beside Caleb. I listen to his even breaths, his tiny chest rising like a gentle refrain. Each heartbeat reminds me of the nights we almost lost him. And I realize, the miracle was never that I saved a dog. The miracle was that he saved my son's heart, and the faith I thought I'd lost. Valor is no longer a worthless runt. He is proof that no life should ever be thrown away. Proof that when we choose love instead of indifference, the darkness will never outshine the light. If you're hearing this story, I want to ask you, have you ever saved a dog? Or perhaps, has a dog ever saved you? If so, share your story. Because each fragment of love, when joined together, can build a world where no animal is left behind, no life trembles in the dark labeled not worth saving. Write it down. Share it. Together, we can ignite hope. Because sometimes, the smallest things, a breath, a shaky step, a pleading look, are what change a life forever. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Together, we can build a community where the language of love between people and animals is honored, where every life, no matter how small, has a chance to live, to love, and to be loved.